Welcome back to the Play-by-Play, a sports media talk show from Awful Announcing, where it is almost 2026. We'll have predictions and a look ahead to the new year coming later this week on the show. But today, JJ Redick goes back to being JJ Redick, and Pat McAfee teases the end of his beloved kicking contest, and chaos ensues. I'm Brendan Clean, staff writer at Awful Announcing. That's Ben Axelrod, senior editor at Awful Announcing. Hit follow, hit subscribe if you haven't already. We're live for you 3 times a week, covering all things sports media. Ben, let's start with Pat McAfee. This is a weird one, a story that I feel like is kind of going under the radar, despite it including his potentially most popular singular piece of content that he puts out, you could say. And a pretty strong reaction from him, maybe just because of the holiday. It sort of went overlooked, but all the way back on December 20th, McAfee teased the end of the College GameDay kicking contest. He did it on Kyle Field in the stadium on the actual playing field for the college football playoff game between A&M and Miami, and did it for more money, even gave the kid multiple opportunities beyond what he usually does, clearly wanting it to be the biggest and most exciting version of the kicking contest yet. But twice said this might be the last one we ever do, kind of offhandedly, but you know, for people like us, it did not go unnoticed. Let's just start there. What did you think of him saying that, or before we saw all the other layers that came about? And if we had recorded an episode that day, what would you have said? What did you think of him throwing that out, Ben?
Definitely something else is going on behind the scenes. Like because on the surface, it just doesn't make sense. Like this has clearly become Game Day's most popular segment. This has become, even though it's not at the end of the show, I think it's effectively become the heir apparent to the Corso mascot head. I think this is the signature segment of Game Day. It's typically its most viral segment each week. I think Pat, you know, we talk a lot about how Pat's polarizing, and I always come back to he's at his best on Game Day and WWE. But like this is what he gets credit for. That this is the Pat McAfee signature segment on College Game Day. So the idea that he would just tease that it could be going away, it makes you think something more is going on behind the scenes. And so you start to think about what that could be. Obviously, it's been established Pat pays for this, like out of his own pocket. So maybe he's just like, why am I doing this? Why am I the one on the hook for this? Maybe something happened with a sponsor that fell through, or I don't know. I mean, obviously, Pat knew what he was doing by floating it out there. If this was something that was just going to go away, then it would just go away. So the fact that Pat put it out there makes me think that he wants it to stay, but I don't know. What did you think?
I wasn't sure what to think. I definitely agree that it wasn't an accident, we'll get to his response in a minute, but he said in various forms, once he finally was forced to speak about it because of the subsequent reporting that came out at Front Office Sports, he answered on his show. And again, we'll get there, but he part of what he said then was, who knows? It might just be the end. You never know. It was the last one of the season, so I was just saying it might be. It's like, well, you haven't said that any of the past couple of years, so clearly there's something different going on. In our article, Sam Newman contributed the idea that potentially, he's looking for a sponsor for it, a more consistent and frequent thing. Maybe that's a charity, maybe that's a corporation, whatever. There's a million ways that it could go. But I understand the general idea of how many, the Corso headgear thing is obviously vastly different because it's a pick. So it's inherently different every week. There's a game to pick on a different campus. This kicking contest, it is fairly replicated. If you watch one, you've maybe kind of seen them all, even though obviously you don't know if the kid's going to make it or not. But we've seen plenty of makes. We've seen plenty of misses. We've seen huge dollar amounts. We've seen, guest, holders, or Kirk holding it, or the dog pooping. I do understand the idea that it might have run its course, but what really kicked it into high gear was on his, at Front Office Sports after he makes those comments. They run with an anonymous source, somebody from the industry, I suppose, with a pretty incensed quote that kind of came out of nowhere. The quote was as follows: "It would make absolutely no business sense, that's for sure. They had the Corso thing for almost 4 decades. This is a similar deal. It's the main attraction for the show," says one source. "It has a benevolent quality to it because a lot of money goes to charity, so everybody's really proud of that. Now, if Pat all of a sudden is saying I'm in the poorhouse because I gave away $2 million, well, that's his fucking problem for making bets his ass can't cash. Still, he gives away a lot of money. It's a fantastic segment every week." So just like completely over the top there. Like I don't even understand. He never said he was in the poorhouse. He never said anything about it even being a financial reason. Never mentioned the charity side. Like none of these things were in the comments, and we were pretty careful, I would say, in our write up to note that the thing we were homing in on was these very offhand, no context, throwaway lines that Pat made during the segment at Kyle Field. And that was it. This is assuming a whole bunch of stuff, and I think rightly made him very upset. And again, we'll get to that. But what did you think of the quote?
Well, it's kind of all over the place because as you said, he never alluded to this being a financial thing. And even if it was a financial thing, even if Pat McAfee went to ESPN and said, "Hey, I'd really like to continue doing the kicking contest, but I can't be on the hook for this every week," like that would be totally valid. That would be totally fair. I don't think anybody would look at Pat McAfee and be like, "Hey, asshole, like pay up. Like this is your thing." Like it's kind of insane. ESPN lets him pay for it now. It's kind of insane. ESPN hasn't stepped in and said, "Hey, we got it. Like this is we'll get a sponsor." Yeah. This is a very easy sponsorship for us. That I would imagine there would be a line out the door of sponsors willing to sign up for this. Like it's kind of nuts that he pays for it himself as is. So he did
clarify again on his show. Part of the clarification that he provided ultimately was to confirm or at least like acknowledge the specifics of how that money moves. You know, he said it's from his corporate accounts, so to speak, not literally like his personal savings account. Obviously,
he's not Venmoing.
Yeah, exactly. But like that does put in a little bit of perspective. Like this is coming from the money that his show generates and kind of being redirected back into growing his brand. Like if you think about it that way, it makes a little bit more sense how he could keep it going. But I totally agree that if there was a way to make it help the financial side along, like I kind of doubt that that's what this is over, because otherwise, like you're saying, that would be such an easy solution.
Yeah. I mean, my mind goes to like, is Pat alluding to he might be gone because Pat has done that song and dance with ESPN on game day. I believe now he does have a contract that carries him through at least next season. And so, but who knows? I mean, contracts are in this industry, they come and go as the talent wants them to sometimes. So who knows, especially with the leverage he has overall as an individual talent. Like if he wanted to leave the show, he could leave the show. So that's where my mind goes to it. But yeah, the idea that like this would be Pat's no longer willing to pay and it would be a bad business decision for him not to pay, that just like, that doesn't add up. That just sounds like somebody who has a gripe against Pat as opposed to a firm grasp about what's really going on here.
100% agree. And to add to some of the, media criticism we do from time to time here, with all respect to Front Office Sports, which tends to put out great stuff, and we piggyback on a lot of their work and vice versa. And, McCarthy over there does a great job and adds to stories all the time. In this case, I felt like the not knowing how close to the situation this anonymous source was really did that story, didn't do it justice. It put the source, although we'll never know who they are, so I guess they're anonymous, whatever, in a weird spot. I don't know what they would say if they knew it would be used this way. Maybe they did. It made it hard to tell how seriously to take this quote. Is it just somebody gossiping? Or is it somebody in ESPN or around that show? That would be very different. All it's worded as is one source. I would like in that situation to say a source close to ESPN, a source at a rival network, something to understand better. And not just for my sake or yours or anyone reading it, but also for McAfee. So he knows where this is coming from, right? Because obviously it's fair on his end to combat things that have come out that are very directly from ESPN. He has his own brand of doing it, but I think it's fair for him to defend himself if his own colleagues are the ones saying this. Whereas if it's gossip, maybe he just overlooks it. But he did not overlook it, in part because on his show Friday, when JJ Watt was on for one of his recurring segments, Watt basically forced the conversation into the show. And I would say, what jumped out to you about the response? I feel like, to me, Ben, it was the hinting in the same direction you were just hinting of pointing out, well, I don't even know what's going to go on with game day. That was what jumped out to me, besides all the cursing and the typical executive bashing that McAfee tends to veer into when this stuff comes up. I thought it was interesting that a couple different times he threw out, well, the reason I said this is because I can't even begin to imagine what the show will look like next year. And I'm sitting there writing this article thinking, I don't know of any changes going on with College GameDay,
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that Pat, he knows how to play the leverage game. I in this instance, I don't know what he is trying to leverage. I don't know if it's his deal. I don't know if it's he wants this thing sponsored. I don't know if it's he wants to stop paying. Like I don't know. I don't even. I think it's kind of unfair to speculate, but he is the one who threw it out there. And the fact that he has alluded to his future on the show being uncertain in past seasons, and then he ultimately comes
almost
back
every year. I think, kind of every year around this time.
Yeah, I said, I think he is under a multi-year contract at this point, but it feels very year to year. As most things do in this industry, and sometimes with Pat even. I've seen it first.
And to his, go ahead. You've seen it firsthand.
Well, just with the WWE, it's like WWE, he's supposed to be there a certain amount of time, and then his priorities change, his mind changes. He realized maybe he overcommitted, and this guy's one of the biggest media stars on the planet. He's starting to get into Hollywood. So it's not crazy to think that this would either be a leverage play or he is seriously considering leaving the show.
And to the leverage point, right? In addition to just being big and any one of his jobs likely not being life or death for his career, although of course his own show probably being the most important, considering that he employs a lot of people and clearly takes that seriously. Like, he could lose the WWE thing, and of course it would suck, but he's going to be fine. And I think everybody on all those sides of it knows that. But there's also the element with the game day side of it, where we've heard rumors and kind of behind the scenes reporting, I think most concretely from Andrew Marchand, that Pat has there have been whispers about potentially starting a competition, a competing show for game day, maybe before he was on the show or at various times when he's contemplated what it would look like to leave it. Obviously, Barstool did something along those lines on it from a digital standpoint. Now they've partnered with the actual competition at Fox. What would a new entrant into that sphere look like with the reach that McAfee's YouTube channel alone has? I think he is smart to not marry himself so strongly to any particular anything, really. He's gone through a FanDuel deal with his show already, all of it. So I think that that's just really what's going on here. And I think it's savvy, and at the end of the day. But I guess, to circle back to the original concept of all of this, Ben, the contest, I have to align and agree with what McAfee's right-hand man at ESPN, Mike Foss, posted on Twitter about all of this, where he said, if the field goal kick never came back, does anyone, anonymous or otherwise, believe that out of all people, this guy doesn't have 100 new gimmicks ready to rip? And that's kind of where I come down. Whether it's over or not, whether it's under the ESPN game day umbrella or not, the kicking contest going away, I would almost be expecting, damn, he has something bigger up his sleeve. Like, it's Pat McAfee. He's not just going to willingly, take his backpack and go home for the day. He wants to do something likely bigger and better than this if he's ever going to get rid of it.
Yeah. To reinforce your point too about him potentially doing something on his own, I thought it was really telling when everything was going on with the ESPN YouTube TV deal and they put Game Day on X, and Pat was like effusive in his praise of the reach that X has and their partnership with X. And I know Game Day wound up being streamed through the rest of the season on X, but like Pat made it sound like there was something going on with him and X that was larger than all of this. And I think you look at his involvement in Ari Emanuel's podcast, his ties to Nick Khan, just in terms of like, he is connected to some heavy hitters. Like, he is connected to power players. And so the idea of him launching his own thing is not far-fetched in the least. And then to your other point and to Mike Foss's point, like, yeah, like what, Pat's going to stop doing the kicking contest and then just sit there and nod along and give benign takes? Like, he'll do something else. Like, Pat's going to be the center of attention on that show.
Some kind of sponsored segment where he walks through a Home Depot and everybody changes the channel. No, that's not what's going to happen.
Right. I mean, I look at you look at the most viral or most famous moments from Game Day this season, and I think of him jumping off that high dive in Coral Gables in the Speedo before the Miami game. Like, he'll come up with something. It doesn't have to be the kicking contest. I think the kicking contest works. I think that obviously it fits his ethos as a punter. And so it's become a thing. Like, I do think the idea that people wouldn't miss it, I don't agree with that, but I also do agree with the idea that something else would take its place and maybe people would like that even more.
Well, there's going to be a couple episodes of Game Day before we wrap here. Kicking contest appears to be done for the year. And then it'll be officially, countdown to will McAfee be on that set in September of next year. And that's sort of the cycle we've been on with all things Pat for ever since he really broke through in sports media. Let's go to Pat McAfee's once upon a time sort of counterpart in the NBA in some ways, which is JJ Redick, somebody who also built a pretty impressive media apparatus shortly after retirement, but then became the head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. And that's JJ Redick, who had the Lakers finishing relatively strong last year, or playing relatively strong. They finished with the 3 seed. They obviously are part of the most, the biggest NBA story of 2025 with the Luka Doncic trade. Flame out a little in the playoffs. And this year has been rocky to say the least. An injury-riddled start for LeBron James. Now he's back. The team's not really fitting and gelling much lately. And yet, JJ Redick, being JJ Redick, continues to dominate the spotlight in spite of all of that. And I think that is where we sort of enter now, where he's had a couple of rants, I would say, lately, where I'll take a little bit of time to say, courtesy of my Phoenix Suns on a couple of occasions. Very, very nice for me. But just saying his team's not playing hard enough. Saying his team is the same guys keep not giving effort, and film session's going to be hell, and they know who they are. And some of these veiled things that you just don't hear coaches say too often, and you kind of wonder if they're going to land right. And they have not landed right in the media. Kendrick Perkins, Kenyon Martin, Dwayne Wade, all of NBA Twitter who posted a similar response from JJ about Doc Rivers doing a rant like this when he was in the media. Like, it has just been rain down on JJ Redick, because I think people see an opening here for a guy that they just don't like. Ben, what do you make of all of this and the continued outspoken Duke guy to NBA podcaster / first take villain to head coach to very vocal head coach kind of track that JJ's traveled since we really started covering him as a media figure?
It's the least liked I can remember him being since Duke. It reminds me, like, the vitriol lately reminds me of when he was at Duke, and everyone's just kind of like, this guy's a dick. Like, this guy's an asshole. Like, this guy seems like a tough hang. Like I don't, it was interesting because it seemed like he overcame a lot of that during his playing career by the end of it, at least. And then especially during his foray into media, and even to a degree, I'd say during his first season with the Lakers, in which he was pretty universally praised. And then, I mean, I don't know. I think the Doc Rivers, like throwing that back in his face, is perfectly valid. It's pretty much the same sort of criticism. It's kind of the same blame everybody but myself mentality. I don't. And then I think the other part of this is, like, do you think he's talking about LeBron?
I don't know who he's talking about. I mean,
because it feels like just call out LeBron. Just call out LeBron. I think that's the other thing is people.
But can you?
I don't know if he can't, then stop subtweeting him. You know?
Yeah. I think if it's LeBron, I feel like the only way you can approach that, especially given that they at least had a co-host relationship prior to him taking the job, given the podcast that they did together, you got to imagine you just take care of that behind the scenes, or you just let it linger and say, hey, it's LeBron. There wasn't much I could do. He's out after the season, most likely. He's pretending like he's going to go somewhere in the off season. There's noise all the time. And you just sort of hope management takes your side, because what the hell are you supposed to do? But I have a hard time imagining JJ Redick's naive enough to think that he can throw this anonymous, generalized shade toward LeBron in the media and get away with that. That almost seems like a more likely path to getting fired than just ignoring it.
Yeah, I just feel like if it's not LeBron, if it's not Luka, like, I don't know, call out DeAndre Ayton, like call out who, like, you know, you can do that. You're the head coach. So I don't know. I actually thought
it's not a basketball show that we're doing, obviously, so we don't have to get too far in the weeds, but it's like bench those guys.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it's been this weird pattern where it's like, it almost just seems like he maybe wants a trade. Like he's almost like a player he's like the coach version of Giannis or something, where he's just trying to manipulate the conversation to get sent where he wants to get sent, or get the reinforcements he wants alongside him or something. But he's just doing it from the head coach podium, and we're not used to that.
Yeah. And I also think, I thought DeAndre Ayton's response to it was pretty telling. There's a clip of him at practice the day after, and they asked him, you know, JJ said today was going to be uncomfortable. Today was going to be tough. What was it like? And DeAndre Ayton kind of just rolled his eyes and said, like, and you guys bought into that, like kind of making it sound like all of this is just for show. Like all of it, like that, what JJ's saying one thing to the media to sound tough and to sound transparent, even though he's not really being transparent because he's not naming names, and then doing another thing behind closed doors with his team. So I thought that was like the other shoe of all this to drop is like, okay, he's saying all this, but is this actually what's going on? Or is this just like JJ Redick trying to cultivate some sort of personality for himself in the media space, which we obviously know he knows how to play that game too.
It's a weird thing, right? Like the Lakers' job too, that's a stable, steady job. And you have Luka Doncic.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be impressive if he burnt through it because he just misjudged how to handle himself publicly, or had too much of a sense of how he was being seen to just put his head down and coach. That's not a path I thought this would go. Honestly, I thought maybe he would I could see him realizing he didn't like it, or he wasn't good at it, or maybe, you know, if the LeBron thing had kept up in a better direction and he had maybe not had the injuries and stuff this year and whatnot, and LeBron still had a lot of leverage and power, maybe LeBron just gets him fired because he doesn't like him, or Luka the same. But just not navigating the public side of this well enough, and the communication side, that's the part you would think that's what you hire a media guy to be good at, right? Like you think all the other stuff is where the issues would come, but I guess it just shows there's a very big difference between how you communicate with the microphone in a ESPN studio versus even to local media or to your team and coaches.
It's a good job. It's also a weird job because it's Luka's team. just by the fact of him being the best player on the team and him obviously being as young as he is. But you also have LeBron in his presence. You also have LeBron's impending free agency hanging over the season. You have an ownership change going on. You have a team that's clearly not good enough, I think, to win the championship, and yet you still have championship expectations. Like, it's just an overall weird job. And you factor in his personality, like, this could play in Portland, this could play in Denver, this could play in a lot of markets. It's just a weird kind of thing to throw into the mix of what's already kind of a combustible situation. And I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this a lot between at least now and the trade deadline in February.
Yeah, like you look at it, right? Players, I think it's safe to say, don't like him. And I think it's because of his attitude and the way that he sort of holds himself. I would say players older than him or of his same age, right? He clearly connected well and was a great interviewer with the guys who were in the league as he started his media career. And some of them were around his age, but I think he has a reverence for great players and understands the craft of the NBA and was able to cut through with those guys. But people who are out of the league and can kind of see him for what he is, I think that they pretty roundly don't appreciate his vibe. Like, I think what Kenyon Martin said, even though it's Kenyon Martin, it probably speaks for a lot of people. Kendrick Perkins has never been very respectful of JJ, all that kind of stuff. But I think what sort of sold some people, and definitely I think sold the non-players in the media when Redick took this job, was the humility that I think he showed, right? Where he was very like, I'm here to learn. I don't know everything there is to know. I'm going to seize this moment. The more I thought about it, coaching is for me, whatever it might have been. I think that's what sort of turned the tide for the first year or so, or I guess less, whatever, maybe until the playoffs last year. I would say all of last season. But now we're back to square one, and he seems like the least humble guy out of the 30 coaches in the league. When you hear him talk, it's this team is failing me. It is sort of the vibe that you're giving off, and it's just never a good look for a coach, especially in a media market like LA where it's just not going to fly.
I will say, and I think some of this stuff is really annoying. Like when I hear stuff like he made his sons write persuasive essays to get their Christmas presents, like I just kind of roll my eyes. It's like, all right, we got you, man. I'm glad though, like he exists, and I'm glad he exists in coaching. Like I mean, there's a lot of NBA teams. I could not tell you the name of their head coach right now. Like it is just like generic guy, rotation builder. Like a lot of them seem to have track records now, like overseas, or they came up through the G, like just like guys who I don't know anything beyond them, beyond they are the head coach of the Minnesota Timberwolves right now. And so I think back to the Dallas Cowboys, no offense to Chris Finch. I think back to the Dallas Cowboys documentary.
Chris Finch is actually great in the media.
Yeah, I was going to say that was unfair. Like maybe like Mark Dagnall, like maybe like, I don't know. Just
yeah, exactly.
Somebody who's just generic coach, good team, bad team, whatever, doesn't matter. I like having these like eccentric personalities that don't really exist, especially in the NBA. There's still a handful of them in the NFL, but the NBA, like we don't really get like big personality guy as the coach anymore. It's like JJ, it's Doc. And after that,
Missoula's a weirdo.
Yeah. Missoula,
I wouldn't say it's quite the cult of personality like we're used to, but it's definitely people know Joe Missoula. They've seen comments. They've seen the town analysis or whatever it might be. But yeah, there's not a lot of them.
No. And it's refreshing. Like it's fun. Like we could get into a real like power struggle here with like JJ and LeBron at some point, which would be a lot of fun from a media standpoint. It makes me think of the Dallas Cowboys documentary and how much I appreciated Jimmy Johnson and the fact that those personalities seem like they're from a bygone era. And so to have one now in the most high profile job in all of coaching, all of sports, maybe that's pretty fun. So I'm excited for that.
I think the same thing about Dan Hurley. I'm never gonna wish a messy, loud coach away. Mm-hmm. I would like for Redick to keep this job, if only for that reason. But I don't think he's I don't think he's doing himself any favors right now, especially given that most of the time, even now, people are going to give LeBron the benefit of the doubt, right?
Yeah.
And you kind like I think Dwayne Wade's response was pretty direct in that regard. He said on the Amazon pregame show the other night that LeBron's just working in his golf simulator. He's unbothered by JJ's passive aggressive comments, So even if the excuse is LeBron is disengaged and distracted, somehow that ends up with JJ looking worse.
Yeah.
It's just not gonna. He's not gonna score these wins by just throwing people under the bus as the team continues to lose. That's not going to be the way out.
No, I think, we can get in the weeds on LeBron, and I'm the biggest LeBron fan on the planet. My dad's from Akron, so like I've known about LeBron since he was a sophomore in high school, played for my favorite team, won my favorite team a championship. Like, love LeBron. I think a lot of the stuff the last few years has been kind of annoying. The Bronny stuff missed the mark for me. A lot of the stuff this year has missed the mark for me. But he's like, make no mistake, like he is a made man. Like he is.
Mm-hmm.
You don't win that power struggle. That's
No.
No one wins that power struggle. Even with Luka on the roster, even with LeBron heading toward free agency next, like if he wants to be a Laker next year, I think he'll be a Laker next year. Like I just think that is a power and a presence in basketball that outside of Michael Jordan doesn't exist. And I think that's something that like needs to be taken into account when it comes to to follow up on my point about like, why doesn't JJ Redick just name LeBron? Like, that's why JJ Redick doesn't name LeBron. So it's like either do it or don't do it, but you're not going to win that power struggle either way.
Well, the other thing that's interesting, like speaking of the players, is it's as more time goes by and this now weird chapter we're in, which by the way could be a distant memory by the playoffs if they get it figured out or whatever it ends up looking like. But it feels crazier now to think that LeBron agreed to do a podcast with this guy, like I'm not even saying that we know anything about their personal relationship, but LeBron's coaches are side characters for the most part. They're just the guy that talks to the media and holds the clipboard. And he rarely has had famous coaches. I mean, Spoelstra kind of became famous and everything, but this is not how those guys handle themselves. And you'd think LeBron would have kind of seen that given the time that they spent together, but yet he really kind of put his arm around Redick all throughout, including probably giving a thumbs up on the hire. And all that in spite of what we know is a pretty widely disliked guy among a lot of former players. So that wrinkle of it just makes it all the more confusing to kind of chart it out. But I'm sure, given that it's the Lakers, anything that happens will become public information very quickly. So we will not be lacking in details. That'll wrap us up for the day. Hit follow, hit subscribe wherever you're finding us. We'll be back live at least one more time on Tuesday, covering our predictions for 2026, all the biggest sports media stories that we can see coming and where we think they'll go. So keep it tuned in right here on YouTube for that. And it'll be in the feed right afterward. Check out awfulannouncing.com in the meantime for all your sports media coverage.